One of the craziest stories of the offseason, Nico Iamaleava transferring from Tennessee to UCLA. And with that has come a lot of hype for this UCLA program, but I think it needs to be dampened a little bit because the quarterback position isn't everything. And when you take a deep dive into this UCLA roster, I don't think that having Nico Iamaleava is going to turn them into a championship contender by any means. First game up is a home match with Utah. The Utes finally moving on from Cam Rising. They have New Mexico transfer quarterback Devin Dampier transferring in, and he's going to be a really solid replacement. Hopefully, he can stay healthy for a full season. This is something that Utah really needs to have, just consistency at the quarterback position. But overall, the program's looking really solid, and I think that UCLA actually is going to struggle quite a bit in this one. I think the Utes get it done early in the season. UCLA will drop to 0-1 despite having Nico Iamaleava.
And the big thing there is just Nico needs weapons, and UCLA does not have a lot of good weapons for him to use. They have a lot of young guys on the roster who were mostly from the team last year, but they weren't significant contributors, and I really don't see how they will be able to elevate Nico's play, especially when you look at it stats wise. Nico had less passing yards at Tennessee last year with significantly better weapons than UCLA's quarterback from last year. We'll see how it goes, but I definitely think with worse weapons at UCLA, Nico will struggle. And I think that will be even more evident the following week with a road trip against UNLV. UNLV hit transfer portal very hard. They got Alex Orji, quarterback from Michigan, revamped their entire offensive line using the transfer portal, got a significant amount of weapons as well. They really only have like five guys returning that were on the team last year as starters. So usually that is a little bit of a challenge when you have that many new players coming into a program. But I think UNLV is going to have a pretty good chance of getting a decent amount of wins and competing in the Mountain West. I think they might be able to beat Boise State during the regular season, maybe be the regular season champs. We'll have to see it when we actually get to UNLV and Boise State's predictions. But I think with it being a home game for the Rebels, I think they'll be able to drop UCLA to 0-2. Really could go either way. It depends on how Nico plays in this UCLA system. But I do think the amount of talent UNLV is bringing in will outweigh the talent UCLA has, particularly with the amount of people they're losing on the defensive side of the ball. That's going to be the difference maker.
Yeah, and I mean, another factor, just losing your first game after having all of this offseason hype built. I've seen some things saying that UCLA should get 9 wins, which is just absolutely ridiculous. There's no reason for it. Sure, Nico's a good quarterback, but they're not going to win that many games. It's not even realistic to think you can flip a program around that fast. The next game against New Mexico should honestly be a pretty easy win. So they'll finally get in the win column before their first bye week. And out of that, it's Big Ten play. And the first matchup, not too difficult, going on the road to Northwestern, who still doesn't have a home stadium. This game, it shouldn't be too tough for UCLA, I don't think. This is one of those games where I do believe Nico Iamaleava will be a big factor. He is good enough that he can bring UCLA to a win over some of these lower tier Big Ten teams, such as Northwestern. I think that'll be the case here.
And like Jonah was saying, with Northwestern not really having a stadium, they didn't really have a home field advantage, even with it being a long road trip for the Bruins. They should be able to get in the win column just because Northwestern doesn't have that much talent. The same thing cannot be said for their next opponent, hosting Penn State, the Nittany Lions returning Drew Aller, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton on the offensive side of the ball, getting a lot of wide receivers in the transfer portal as well. And on the defensive side of the ball, they have a lot of studs on the defensive line, a lot of edge rushers. And the big story is they went and got Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator from Ohio State last year, to be their defensive coordinator. This Penn State team is going to be scary next year. easily could end up winning the Big Ten and probably a shoo-in for the college football playoffs, whether it is as the Big Ten champ or as an at-large bid. I really don't see how UCLA is going to be able to stop this Penn State offense, given how much they've lost defensively. The defensive line is just not going to be able to get through this Penn State O line that year in and year out is one of the best in the country. I think the Nittany Lions just run all over the Bruins and drop them to 2-3.
And then it's a road trip to Michigan State. Aiden Childs returning at quarterback, and we actually think he's a pretty intriguing player for next season. He was a turnover machine last year, but if he can start to tone that down, he showed a ton of flashes of potential. And they also have Nick Marsh returning at the wide receiver position. I think that's going to be a deadly connection, and it's going to give Michigan State a really good chance here at home. Like we were talking about earlier, having those skill position players is incredibly important. And that's something that Michigan State has. And UCLA, like Connor said earlier, doesn't really have. Nico needs more weapons. He's not going to have them this season. I think that UCLA is going to drop this on the road to Michigan State as well.
They should get back in the win column the following week, though, against Maryland. That's such a long road trip for the Terrapins. And Maryland's just not a very good team. Maryland has been in a rebuild stage since the departure of Talia Tagovailoa a couple years ago. And when he left, Maryland was never really a competitive team after that. And I don't think they will be this year. There's just really no weapons or players to really consider as noteworthy to warrant getting a win over some of these teams that have players that are more talented. Like we were saying with Nico, he might be able to keep games competitive against the top tier teams, but he will definitely be able to will UCLA to wins over the lower tier teams in the Power Four, like Northwestern earlier on and like Maryland now, especially with the fact that it is such a long road trip. The Bruins should move to 3-4 here.
Then it's a road trip to Indiana, and the Hoosiers are bringing in Cal transfer quarterback Fernando Mendoza, and he's actually one of the top rated prospects in the NFL draft. I think he's going to do a really good job in this Kurt Cignetti offense. Indiana should once again be a solid team in the Big Ten. They might not have as good of a chance at the college football playoffs this season because the schedule's a little bit tougher, but I still think they're going to be incredibly competitive. They're significantly more talented than UCLA. I think that the Bruins are going to drop this one pretty handedly heading into their second bye week. And after that bye week, it's a home matchup with Nebraska. Dylan Raiola coming back at the quarterback position. And I do think that the Nebraska is going to be a really solid team once again next year. But if we know anything about Nebraska, it's that they always lose some games that they shouldn't. And we do think that they're better than UCLA. But every once in a while, they just pull off a game that is completely illogical. And I think that's going to be the UCLA game this year. The Bruins will pull this one out at home, despite not having much of a home field advantage.
And part of that is also the fact that UCLA did beat Nebraska last season when Nebraska was arguably one of the better teams earlier on in the season in the Big Ten, even giving Ohio State a scare at the shoe. So Nebraska definitely has a lot of potential, but like Jonah was saying, history has shown that they do end up dropping a game that they shouldn't pretty consistently, and we do think UCLA can pull it off with it being in California, which is a bit of a road trip for the Cornhuskers, and with Nico as their quarterback, maybe being able to will this team to a win by this point in the season as well. Maybe he starts clicking with some of these younger weapons that he has. The following week, though, Nico returns to the shoe to face off against the defending national champions in the Ohio State Buckeyes. And in the first half against them, he looked pretty decent, especially using his legs. But in the second half, he ended up crumbling, much like his helmet did in the cold weather. I don't think UCLA stands a chance against Ohio State. There's way too many weapons on both sides of the ball. The Buckeyes should be able to handle UCLA no problem. And then the following week against Washington, Washington's going to be an interesting team to watch out for next year. They have Damon Williams stepping up as their starting quarterback after he filled in for Will Rogers a couple times last season. And if he's able to elevate his play even more so from what we saw last year and the few games he was in, including that bowl game where he was spectacular in, Washington's going to be a dangerous team. They got their starting running back returning. They have a lot of solid weapons, and I think the defense is going to be decently good, especially in their second year in the Big Ten. I don't see UCLA competing with the amount of talent that Washington has. That's usually just the name of the game for UCLA here. They are just severely outgunned at basically every skill position. The only thing that will keep them afloat is Nico and the offensive line getting bolstered in the transfer portal with a lot of senior and graduate students. But against Washington, it will not matter. The Huskies should get the job done on the road, dropping UCLA to 4-7.
And then to close out the season, it's the rivalry game with USC. This one generally pretty close, but I think the Trojans are definitely the more talented team. Miller Moss transferring to Louisville, so he's going to be replaced by Jordan Mailata. Mailata honestly looked really solid against Notre Dame. They were in that game for most of it until a couple pick sixes kind of put it out of reach near the end of it. But overall, USC should be better this year. I don't expect them to compete for, the Big Ten championship or a playoff spot, but they're a solid bowl team. They'll win a couple more games than that even. And I think that they are going to be better than UCLA. Bruins will most likely drop this game as well and finish the season a very disappointing 4-8. Definitely not what their fans want to hear, I don't think, but it's just the realistic look on this schedule. One of the toughest in the country, Wisconsin's up there as well as just a slightly tougher schedule than UCLA. Our way too early projection was 3.85 wins, and we had UCLA going 3-9. We did bring it up just one win because of the addition of Nico. The projection also came up a decent amount to 4.9 wins, 3.2 and 5.8 in Big Ten play. The floor is this 3-9 prediction that we did have originally. We brought it up just slightly, like I said, to 4-8. We do think that there's a chance they could still even hit that if Nico just doesn't pan out, or like we've been saying all along in this video, he just has no weapons. So if he can't have guys to throw the football to, it doesn't matter how good of a quarterback he is. The ceiling, though, is making a bowl game. This is really, I think, the very best UCLA could do at 7-5. There's some games on the schedule that just, no matter what, they're not going to win. I believe in this prediction, we flipped both Utah and UNLV to wins, as well as a couple Big Ten games. So it's possible that UCLA could make a bowl game. I just find it very tough, especially in this first season. Maybe next year, if they are able to retain Nico once again, then they get him some weapons. We can talk about UCLA having a better season. But for now, I think 4-8 is really the most realistic outcome for this team. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.